Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a graduate student working on a field project, and today I'm going to demonstrate my distributed multiplayer game application. So the application starts right now. It has a local server capability, but the application is really intended to play as a client and with dedicated servers. So I'm going to start this as a client, and what this is a distributed multiplayer online game that where rather than having dedicated servers that are deployed by the game developer, the players themselves create their own servers. So, for example, you'll see here that there are several places I've already created. There's also the opportunity to create your own. So here, if I go to travel to a new place and make a homestead and click travel, the first thing that I'll see is a warning that this does require a Microsoft a Microsoft Azure account and will create a virtual machine that can cost money. So there's an opportunity here to dump out of that if you don't want to do that. If you don't have an account, you can go to this URL to make one. And once you proceed, then it gives you the opportunity to make a server. Now, to make a game server for a player, all that's required is specifying the new location. Call this something like Balloon Village. And you add a username and password. Based on Azure rules, you can't use the word admin, so that's why that little warning's there. And whatever password you want, and then you click on Create a New Location. When that happens, Microsoft Azure will ask you to log in. And once you log in, you can close that, and code is being executed to start creating a virtual machine on Azure. That's really all all the user has to do is put in the name of the location they want to create, a username and password, and the rest is automated. I'm using the Azure SDK, which provides the ability to pretty much do anything you want on Azure. I've already created several locations on Azure. Right now I'm using Spotrate virtual machines. Now in Azure, what you can see is that each one of these is created in a resource group. If we look at Balloon City, for example, I have a full virtual machine, all the things that you need to support the virtual machine, including a disk and some networking. And if you look at the virtual machine, one of the things that you can do with Azure is you can set a DNS name. So this is kind of nice because eventually I will be able to make it so that the user can shut down and back up their dedicated server to their own machine, and then only bring it up maybe when their friends are ready to play. And so costs can be reduced by actually only having the server up when they want it. Might even be able to create something that does that in an automatically timed way. Why that's important is that every time you create recreate a virtual machine, the public IP address changes, but the DNS name will stay the same. And that becomes important because the DNS name is actually associated with these names. So if I look at Balloon City, for example, and click Edit, that's actually the key part of this location. That's the domain name for the dedicated server that some player has created. And so eventually, people throughout the world that are playing this game could create their own server, and then just by sharing the URL, people could then add them to their list of travel locations and could travel there. And so here we are at Balloon City, and I've already created this space, and so by moving on to one of these Gifford airships, and eventually I'll have several different dirigibles that you can travel on. You'll see that in the help text below it says press T to open and close the travel menu, and the same menu shows up and you can pick a different location. So let's say we want to travel to Balloonburg. I'll travel there, and I have a cutscene. It's pretty simplistic at this point, but we traveled and now we are at Balloonberg, a completely different location. This is actually on a different dedicated server that would have been made by could have been made by any player in the world, running on their infrastructure. I now move back here. I want to travel back to Balloon City. I have my cutscene. We're back at Balloon City. So that's one mode of travel, is we have vehicles that you hop on and can travel between the different servers. So that was the initial goal, was just to prove that we could create a world with an infrastructure where the game resided on multiple servers, and the game developer doesn't need to provide the server space. They just provide the server code, and then the application actually spins up and creates the server, and the player each player would fund a little bit of server infrastructure to support the massive world that the player could play in. Now, you may be asking what the cost would be. With the spot servers from Azure, this amount of load, it was only about $3 a month, but that might increase. And really, the servers don't use a lot at this stage because they're only transmitting really location or transform information about the players that are in the world. So I don't see them using a lot of bandwidth at this point, or a lot of space to store. The game itself has all the assets, so we're not really using the servers to transmit, for example, this 3D building, which is a museum in New Mexico, by the way. But here I've got another way of transferring between worlds. So here we are in this world, and let's say that there's about 30 or 40 people in here, and we wanted this space to be able to handle more. Well, when we go into this building, there's actually a gate here, and you saw that little flash. We are actually right now on a completely different server. This is not the same server as Balloon City. We went to one that would just be used. So there could be maybe 5 or 10 people in here, and they would not be loading up the Balloon City server. They would be loading up a server that would just be for interacting in this space. And then there's a gate on this side which translates you back to Balloon City server. So as long as there aren't so many people in the roads and byways of this, you would actually be able to really kind of have a lot of different, you could create the perception of being in a massive multi-player world, actually split up in multiple servers, all funded by multiple players. They don't need to negotiate with each other to scrape money together to buy one large server space. They each just provide their little bit of server space, and it all gets used together to create the space. Not only that, but the players create the space, and the developers just provide the assets to go in here, and then the players, and the idea is that the players would make the space. So when it comes to developing novelty on the world, then that would be provided by the players as well. So as a developer, we would just be providing essentially game mechanics and raw assets to use, and then the players could travel around, make new spaces, and explore the creations that each other has created. So that's the idea of this distributed multiplayer world I've created.